Ken Jordan here again. Alright, I've got lots to tell you, lots to go over. I'm gonna have to do an update about my situation here. Well, if anybody cares. I mean, to me, it's pretty big stuff. Not all of it bad for once. This last time period here for me, the last few weeks, has been pretty intense. I've gotta say, the last few days, a little bit better. A whole lot of information coming down about the inauguration, which this should be going up just before. I saw where somebody likened me to Alex Jones, which is really funny, and I will go into that sometime. But the big difference here is that when I'm telling you information, I try and do it in a sensible fashion and not just to fearmonger or go over whatever it is he thinks is going on in the world. A lot of times the poor guy is given misinformation and he doesn't seem to really understand the difference between information and misinformation. It can catch everybody, don't get me wrong. The worst thing you can do when you hear any information coming from a source, even one you know, is assume that it is either correct or incorrect, simply because you like or dislike the person giving it to you. Even things that I've gotten from my coworkers, my bosses, I've always tried to take with that grain of salt. Hopefully you'll do the same here. Look, I'm not even playing with all of you. This is fiction, right? We're going over the SCP information. Those are flat out stories that other people have written. I'm trying to add a little bit to it, and if you take it that way, that's fine. I'm kind of afraid that in the next, well, maybe in the next 12 hours, but in the next days and weeks, certainly, easily in the next year, you're going to start looking around and realize, oh hey, Ken wasn't all that wrong. Ken has been hooking us up with information that we need to survive. But until then, hey, just remember, if I say, hey guys, you should exercise, everybody should exercise. That shouldn't be a big hardship for you. Hey, you should get your diet around. You know you should get your diet around. I'm just supporting you in what you want to do. This is everybody. This is all the time. So don't worry over that. If you hear something and it sounds alright, maybe just give it some thought, give it some consideration, push yourself a little bit. Really, you can do worse than to push yourself into trying to understand things that are a little bit odd and different, and that's really what we're doing here. Like I said, I'll get into a special report on me just in case anybody does care about that, and right now, let's go over SCP-400. I jumped forward a little bit because, quite frankly, I forgot where I was in the SCPs. So I hope I went forward enough that I'm not redoing stuff I've already done. SCP-400 is a collective designation for an anomalous species of arthropod similar to Armadillidium vulgare. Okay, I did not pass Latin when I went to school. I didn't even take Latin when I went to school. This is totally unfair. SCP-400 individuals are morphogenetically similar to a vulgare in appearance, but can be distinguished visually by bright red striping patterns on their dorsal carapace. Visual identification is only possible by individuals not under the influence of subject's anomalous effects. The subject is a parasitic organism which feeds on human mammary secretions. Access to this food source is gained by the habitation and manipulation of deceased human infants. Oh, I get it. Okay, so they infiltrate deceased human infants, reanimate them, use them as a puppet to get at human memories, secretions. Probably, yeah, okay, so they use a pheromone vector to supercharge the mother's instincts to take care of the child. Okay, I selected this one at random. I've got nothing on anything like this ever, but it's not a bad thing to consider, to go over. I'm going to move through these a little more quickly than I was before. Hopefully that's not going to piss anybody off. My goal here is to get to the discussion points. If you really want to hear some good readings of SCPs, and I highly recommend that you do, There are some great people on YouTube doing this. I'll put in anything on SCP, and almost everything you're going to get is going to be in that vein. If you look at things like the creepypastas, which, by the way, is an incredibly stupid name for a scary story. Even, I don't know, scary stories would have been better, but that's just me. Maybe it's because I'm old, but a lot of the readings on those are really well done, and quite frankly, there is some overlap between what you need to push yourself mentally and what you might find a little creepy, a little spooky, or even outright scary. And remember, a lot of times, what you really need to push yourself into is the odd. Things that are a little bit more difficult to focus on because they're strange. So you're looking at taking more benefit from surrealism than just things that are truly scary. So don't worry if, it's like, well, I was listening to this and it didn't scare me at all. I'm so tough and strong inside. Well, okay, two things. One, if you don't have an actual mental problem, if you're a normal human being, which again, 98% of you out there are, if you aren't feeling fear because of these things, that means you're burying the fear of it. And you're probably more afraid rather than less, which is hard for people to understand, but it's also very dangerous. If you see a person who's pretending they're not afraid of a danger or a fight or something that may hurt them, those are the people that fold when they're actually in the emergency situation. Unless, of course, they're part of that 2% grouping, which would tend to vilify. They tend to be psychopaths, they tend to be criminals, but it's also where a lot of our heroes come from. So, if you don't feel fear of things, maybe, just possibly, you can turn that around and not be the world's biggest creep, but actually turn into somebody worth knowing. Okay, this is a different discussion for a different day. And quite frankly, having it here is not going to help anybody. SCP-402. An irregularly shaped solid weighing 4 kilograms. Well, SCP-402 is composed largely of obsidian. Trace amounts of platinum and iridium are present. The object's structure has numerous abnormal microscopic gaps similar to those found in SCP-148. This, along with SCP-402's anomalous density, roughly 8.5 times that of obsidian, suggests that the two materials operate under similar principles. Yeah, it's really odd that it would be heavier rather than lighter with all the gaps in it. Any water that comes into contact with the object develops antimemetic properties, effectively rendering it imperceptible by any direct means. Okay, I get you. So, any water that comes in contact with this basically becomes invisible to the human mind. You can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't touch it. Hold on just a second here. Just in case I take all that out, it was not a shadow person coming for me or anything like that. It was my little portable heater fan that I've been carrying around with me, which you may have heard in the background in some of these other episodes, even though I've been moving around. Much like my chair, I take my heater with me. And it's a good thing, too, because every single place that I've managed to get to in the last 3 weeks has been freaking cold. Okay, SCP-402. And again, I'll try and go through these a little bit faster. The punchline on this is, just so water is rendered imperceptible. There's a nice little bit of a story with it. It could cover a human being. Okay, well, again, I hate to do 2 in a row where it's like, well, I've not heard anything like this before. This one basically would be almost impossible to learn of. The very idea of things that hide themselves from human beings, and I mean, come on guys, this is what we're talking about. This is the crux of what's going on. We hide things from ourselves, so it would be easy enough for objects, other human beings, programs, ideas, to simply become incomprehensible to human beings. Pushing that detriment that we all have as far as we can is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing the SCP thing, to help push that. So the idea that something might use that against us, that's there. Let's see. SCP-403 is a visually unremarkable naphtha-fueled lighter that was discovered in a cafeteria at site redacted. When lit once after a prolonged period of disuse, SCP-403 produces an ordinary flame. However, if ignited repeatedly within 24 hours, the flame produced becomes larger and more violent in nature with each subsequent ignition. During an experiment with Class D, test subject attempted to light SCP-403 a third time within 2 hours, resulting in a powerful explosion of superheated gas and plasma. Okay, an item that has conditions on it that is not exactly ordinary. Why is it not ordinary? We don't know. Could you build a bomb, more or less, that had these conditions on it? Yeah, no, you really could. That would not even be that hard. Could you could pick up something from an alternate reality that was not functioning correctly because of different parameters, due to physics being slightly different in one location than another? We have seen that. So that kind of idea is not something that I would say is impossible at all. Yeah, I'm gonna go with, quite frankly, I think I've actually seen something a lot like that. It was purposefully made, kind of a joke. It did not explode at the end, but we're talking a 2.5 foot tall, flame coming off this thing. That thing got hot. And every time you used it, the flame got bigger. Fortunately, it did run out of fuel, and I think that our SCP-403 there does not. What do we have here? We have SCP-405, which should not shock anybody, which is... Okay, here we go. A contagious phenomenon of unknown origins that causes uncontrolled development of telepathic capabilities in humans. The typical projection of the disease is as follows. Okay. The telepathy virus. Obviously, telepathy is a human ability. We have seen it more strongly in certain circumstances than in others. Don't be confused with the ability of to hear voices, which tends to be a secondary sense that almost all of us have. I believe I've discussed that earlier. Telepathy itself, mind reading, is a very specific condition. We all have the basic ability. It's part of how our brains work. It's part of how we hold to basically the group mind that human beings work under. And yes, you are tied to the rest of humanity, even if you don't know it. If you lived on a desert island away from everybody, things would get really weird for you really fast, because part of the control mechanism that we're talking about here is clearly psychic and or telepathic in nature. You're influenced by the people around you. You're influenced by all of the people of the world. This happens constantly, and you don't know you're being influenced by it. In most of us, it's a fairly process. In some individuals, it's very strong. You can normally tell this because, for instance, some people with severe autism show very high levels of psychic, telepathic, particularly, abilities. They don't have the filter on it that we have. This probably seems very weird because they cannot necessarily communicate with us otherwise to let us know this is going on most of the time. But it is a thing that is known. It is a thing that has been tested and seen to a very high level effect. We're talking where you and I were taking a telepathic test, we might get 17 to, if we become very good at doing it, a 20% hit ratio, which definitely shows that there's something there, but this is a very small effect. The autistic subjects doing it very often get 90 to 100% correct on things like number and letter patterns, which you and I would not do. We would not get anywhere near that in those subject matters. Matter of fact, most people do best if the psychic testing going on has to do with food, particularly if you're hungry, which makes sense because it works down to a survival mechanism that we probably all have. But yeah, if I stick you in a room and I have you fast for 3 days, or better yet, don't give you water for 2 days, then show you 10 boxes with food and or water underneath one of them, you're going to hit that something around 80 or 90% of the time. You're just going to walk over to that box, flip it open, and take the food or water. Even if you can't see it, smell it, and be vacuum sealed so that it's totally protected from your senses, and you're still going to be able to find it. There are huge, huge ratios. Getting numbers and letters, that's really, really high end. Yes, we have worked with some people who otherwise have autism attempting to do this, but the autism does get in the way. Now, a telepathy virus has actually been suggested. There are time periods where people will suddenly go through a heightened state of telepathy or psychic ability. Sometimes we know why. For instance, starvation right before you have a food, finding exercise. That is an easy way of temporarily pushing up psychic ability, pushing it toward a higher end. If you go into the correct meditative state, that's also going to bump you up. Sometimes people just get better for a while. One day they're walking along and they're hitting 17%, the next day they're hitting 40, 50% in telepathic capability. Now, this SCP is a story. They've got a lot of story things on it. It is not necessarily the way that I have seen it, because quite frankly, otherwise, other than small agitation, and it's not the only mental effect that suddenly will go up like that from time to time. I've seen people with mathematic ability suddenly moving upward like that, with memory suddenly moving upward like that. And then, unfortunately, you lose that ability after you kick the virus. But, yeah, I'd say get over to the SCP Foundation and read SCP-405. That's definitely something that's worth knowing about. We are influenced and affected by virus, bacteria, our gut flora and fauna, which are basically viruses and bacteria. I don't want to get too fancy on you. Fungi. These things affect us all the time. And claiming that this is not part of what you're going to need to deal with in the near future is always wrong. You're dealing with it now, you just don't realize that you're dealing with it. But a strengthening of some such phenomenon is definitely something to think about, to understand when you're looking at what's happening with other people. Not everything is always going to be their fault. Now, gosh, I didn't want to get into this as soon, but yeah, the raw fact of the matter is that you're going to need to come up with tricks to basically deal with individuals that you do not wish to harm, who may temporarily or persistently wish to harm you. What do you do if the zombie is your mother, but she might get better later? Think about what you're willing to do in those circumstances. Quite clearly, if she's a zombie, then you take her out. Shots to the head. Basically, if you destroy the brain on things with 2 legs, they go down. But what if zombie mom there might become better at some point in the future? What if this is a temporary thing, where right now, she wants to eat your brain, but in 6 months, if she doesn't get to eat your brain, she might just be your mom again. You need to think about what sort of strategies you would use in a case like that. And that's probably pushing people too far. A lot of people aren't going to be able to understand what I just said there. That's okay. Hopefully enough of you will pick things up, though. Let's move over to SCP-406. This is a 228-meter-long disused railway tunnel in Criggleston, England. I wonder if that's a made-up place name. Criggleston. Because if it's not, that is a wonderful name for a place. The eastern entrance has been infilled and is inaccessible. The western entrance is blocked by a metal fence with a locked gate. SCP-406-1 are persons who emerge via unknown means through the inner northern wall of SCP-406 at a point 15.3 meters from the closest end of the tunnel. These people are instances are invariably initially asleep and walking upright, but most instances wake up naturally shortly after their appearance, usually due to the sudden shock of the cold air within the tunnel. Initial inspection and testing of the emergence point, was unable to identify any anomalous effects. Further testing of the emergence point is prohibited until further notice. Okay, it's a spot where people walk through in their dreams. Probably done this. You've probably done something similar to this at some point in your life, particularly when you were a child. The raw fact of the matter is that space and time don't always work the way we think they do, and sometimes when you're in an altered state of consciousness, you can do things that you could not do, well, in a normal state of consciousness. Moving from your safe, warm bed to a different place or even a different time is not at all impossible. On the good side, unlike the story here, when that happens to you in real life, you tend to end up snapping back to where you started originally, at least eventually. So if you ever slip through time, keep in mind you're probably not going to be stuck there forever. You're going to bounce back to your own place and time. It's where you fit into the nature of the world. Matter of fact, okay, that's me going silent. Okay, I've been talking to some people, and apparently nothing that I've been saying so far has hit that forbidden realm. Again, I'll go into what this means right now. I may be able to open up a little bit more about some of these things. But this is all, again, the stuff I've heard in the bar, after work, or around the water cooler. These are not programs I've worked on. But the secret time travel programs, one of the biggest issues that we've always had with it is that, well, you can send a person both forward and backward through time. Yes, the physics of that actually works, and yes, we're hiding that the physics of it may be possible, even though we've known this for nearly 50 years. The problem with sending a person through time, one way or another, is that there tends to be a recoil. They refer to it as elastic recoil, in fact, where if you send a person from now to 1852, after approximately one full day, the person will tend to snap back to now. We tend, from my understanding of it, and I've asked this question, we tend to stay on the planet, not where we are located in space, because obviously where the world was in 1852 was not anywhere near where we are now. We are, billions or trillions of miles away from that location. You don't show up floating in space. You instead will show up very near your physical location now in space on the planet. And there tends to be a carrying effect for all planets, where when this has been done on other planet surfaces, which is basically Mars, so it's Mars and the Moon, and yeah, you probably don't know this, but the Moon counts as a planet. Anyway, I know you weren't taught that in school, but that is how it is looked at by most scientists, that we have a dual planet with Luna and Terra, and I won't even get into that right now. I'm sorry. That is an aside that you don't really necessarily need right now. But the point is that if you're on the surface of the Moon or the surface of Mars, and time travel becomes part of what you're doing, apparently, from what I've heard, and again, this could all be BS. I did not work on this personally, but people have persistently and consistently mentioned that you always end up at the same place on the planet, regardless of the time you're going there, due to this carrying effect. So if you've ever wondered, well, why don't you end up floating in space? While we do not know the specific mechanism, it is something that happens very consistently. And I was talking about dreams. Yeah, a lot of weird things can happen while you're dreaming. That is an altered state of consciousness. If you dream long enough, meaning the dreams that you have early in the day after a long sleep, you're going to have the biggest chances of those effects taking place. Do we have things where people who are not the same individual show up in similar or the same places on the planet, even though they don't know the other people? I have heard some things, sure. I have heard some things kind of like that. So the idea of people walking out of a sealed tunnel that they couldn't have gotten into, well, sleepwalking, sure. I wouldn't know why they would be called there necessarily, but it would definitely be something to investigate. Oh, SCP-408. I put this in on purpose just because it sounded kind of cute when I looked at it. These are, SCP-408 is a large mass of Leptodoptera, okay, butterflies, taking the appearance of zebra butterflies when not camouflaged. They're camouflaging butterflies. Yeah, that's it. They just self-camouflage, and they do it so well they become functionally invisible. Now, just don't even stop. Go to Google or go to Bing and look up images of insects that are perfectly camouflaged. We are finding more and more of them now than ever before, thanks to the proliferation of cameras. But yeah, there are stuff in this world that you have walked by your entire life that you don't even know that it's there. Now, this is an intelligent grouping of invisible butterflies with an IQ of about 109 or slightly above average. Of course, that's a human test being given to a group of butterflies, so odds are the group of butterflies is smarter than that. I mean, come on, if you were taking a test made up by chimpanzees, you'd probably be shown as an imbecile because you don't understand their chimpanzee mind. So to come across as normal to them would take a lot more intelligence on your part to understand what was actually being tested. So I'm thinking that these fictional butterflies are probably genius butterflies, not of average intelligence. I actually thought it was cute. Plus, the idea of there being things that you just functionally are not going to be aware of that are not human, that are around you. This happens to you every day. A few years ago, there were two tests. A group of students and their professor went to the rainforest in South America. They put a net over a tree, and they shook the tree to get all the insects out of it. And, 20 or 30 people shaking this tree, and they found 700 odd new species of insect right there in this netting by shaking a tree. In the rainforest, in the deep portion of the rainforest. And these were things that had never been noted before. Because again, it's figured that we actually have about half of all insects now. Some of them were things that were very well hidden for their environment, much like what we're talking. Then when they went home, kind of as a lark, months later, somebody said, "Hey, what if we do that here?" And they're like, "Well, maybe we'll find one or two new things." So they went out, they netted a tree on the campus just behind the building. It was literally, you could look out the lab window at this tree. It was, not 20 meters outside their window. They all got around, they shook the tree, the insects fell out of it, and they found 12 to 1,400 new species of insects that they had never seen before, 20 meters from their lab. There are things out there that we don't know about. Now, insects are relatively harmless. The world is not different. The big parts of the world are the things that we have to survive anyway, but there are unknown things. SCP-411 is a gray-haired, blue-eyed Caucasian male of incredibly advanced age. Estimates of his biological age based on information divulged in interviews are in the region of 400 years. Old people. Yeah, we have old people. SCP's 411 Okay, sorry about that. I'm actually still thinking about the insects and how many things around us, things larger than insects, may be out there that we simply haven't been seeing. This is a part of a natural world, and not necessarily something that we're blocked from noticing, but simply things we don't notice. If something is well enough hidden from us, why would we? Particularly in the visual range. We're very visual animals. We tend to process almost everything through sight. So if you have something that's protecting itself by looking like something else, we're probably not going to notice it, not if it does a good enough job. Let's see. So we have a 400-year-old man, SCP-411, ages in reverse, growing younger at the same rate that a normal human ages. The subject's memory also functions in reverse, and the subject has no recollection of past events, but can recall the future. This is certainly a story that we've had. This is a tale in the human schema that comes up over and over again. I think part of it is the fear of being the alien, but part of it may also simply be that people have located individuals kind of like this, or possibly have dealt with them, and it could be that we're not necessarily going to understand what we're saying. We might see this person as being slightly different than we are without understanding why they're different. Because again, he's not necessarily speaking backwards or anything like that. He's just moving the other way in time, or at least getting younger. A little confusing. It also makes for a very interesting read here on the SCP website. And this was SCP-411. I definitely recommend reading this one. I like this story. This is a good story. SCP-415. SCP-415 is a 7.69 centimeter tall Caucasian male of 36 years of age. His blue eyes, receding brown hair, and appears to be human. Subject exhibits an average IQ and relatively stable personality given his situation. He is cooperative with on-site staff, though is nervous around medical equipment and personnel. Well, that's pretty common. A lot of people are nervous around medical equipment and personnel. The subject seems to possess a regenerative healing ability, focusing on tissue and organ regrowth. This ability is most pronounced concerning his internal organs, particularly his liver, spleen, pancreas, and colon. Skeletal breaks have been observed to heal faster than the human norm, but slower than soft organs. That totally makes sense. The subject has shown the ability to survive with organs that have suffered severe damage or been completely removed. The damaged or missing organs will regrow and become fully healthy and functioning within a period of 1 to 3 months. I gotta think this is why the person is nervous around medical equipment and personnel, if you keep taking out his organs. Despite the subject's near immortality thanks to this process, he has shown a completely normal immune system and has been affected by the common cold and influenza with completely unremarkable results. This was done to the person. Several zippers surgically installed on his body, which again would go to the thing. Okay, yeah, so this is a person who was simply messed with to the point where they've become functionally immortal, but they've been really messed up. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna have to do a special on super soldiers. Now, this is, I mean, you probably can't hear it in my voice, but this is a frustrating one for me, because the popular story of the super soldier, the stuff that you've been allowed to hear, is so different than what is really going on. We have biologically modified human beings with superhuman strength, superhuman healing factors, heightened mental awareness, various other abilities which are not even biologically within the norm for human beings. We have people who have been enhanced through cybernetics, who can merge with certain levels of machinery. Now, don't get me wrong here, we're talking about people who can communicate via Wi-Fi, things like that, with a few simple devices placed in their body. And by simple, I don't mean that simple, but you understand what I mean. Instead, what we've been told of super soldiers are actually the remnants of the various mind control programs. And while it is true, some of them can at times show greater than human abilities, particularly in a willingness to get things done. In the main, they're not super anything. These are people who have been greatly harmed and victimized by the programs they've been involved in. They're useful in limited ways for certain jobs, and most of these jobs are things that you would not want foisted upon a young person, a man or woman. Basically, they're brainwashed into being sex slaves or haphazard assassins, people just going nuts and stabbing somebody 80 times, that kind of thing. This is not the same thing as a super soldier. I think they kind of glommed onto that term as a group because it sounds much better than victim, and nobody wants to be a long-term victim who is otherwise attempting to be sane and healthy. So I don't really want to begrudge people that portion of their lives. I will actually do a special on that. There is a lot of information to go over particularly in dealing with what is useful and not useful after we have come up with these programs. It was rather surprising as to what actually makes a super soldier effective, say in combat or even in assassinations. And it was very different than what most of the people putting the programs together thought. Let me do a time check here, and I'm just over 40 minutes. This will probably be 35 minutes after I take out all of the pauses and me saying, so I will leave it here, and I will actually do a report right on top of this about what's been going on in my life and world here, in case anybody's interested in that. I will mark those differently. This should be SCP-12. I will start marking things out of that numbered sequence so that if you want to skip things about my life or whatever, you can just move right past that. Okay, thanks everybody. Talk to you soon.